Hello, my name is Inmar Givoni. I'm a director of engineering at the Uber R&D Center in Toronto. Canada is an important and unique player in the history of AI, and today I'm excited and honored to share my personal story and that of AI in Canada. Hopefully, you will come to appreciate how much Canada has already contributed to the technology and what an incredible place it is to be operating in right now. I've lived in Toronto for the past 16 years. I moved here from Israel to pursue a PhD in AI at the University of Toronto and chose to remain in Canada and make it my permanent home. If it wasn't for COVID-19, this year's largest machine learning and AI conference, NeurIPS, would have been held in Vancouver, Canada. I first attended NeurIPS 14 years ago as a young PhD student. There were maybe 600 participants. It was fun, pretty slow-paced, and a very academic event. Everyone knew each other and discussed the latest advances in the field. We didn't call it AI, but rather machine learning. We'll talk more about the distinction later. Many of my fellow Canadian-based PhD students, friends from back then, are now doing incredible work all over the world and in Canada in the area of AI, including, for example, a lot of people in the DeepMind offices in London. Some of them focus on fundamental research in universities. Some, like myself, focus on industry, from healthcare through banking to bias and fairness in AI. They're in startups, in small tech players, as well as in all the big giants, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. Just to give you a bit of a taste of how rapidly things have changed, this conference, and you can see here the numbers of participants every year from 2002, now has around 13,000 people. The tickets sell out usually in less than 10 minutes, and most participants are now from the industry. This is since AI has made the transition, and now it's one of the most important technologies in the world. Before we begin, let's recall why AI is so important. From a technological perspective, it's transforming how we do things and assisting us in big and small ways. You all carry a powerful AI device around at all times, your smartphone, that has likely over 100 different applications of AI on it, if not more. It's part of how we consume products and content. Think about search and recommendation systems. It's part of how we manage and organize what we care about. Think about photo collections and social interactions. It assists us in what we need to do, how, where, and when we need to go. And of course, it's transforming how businesses are operating and even how businesses are defined. Anything that has such an important technological implications comes with financial ones. AI is clearly growing as an area of interest and excitement for businesses. One metric that tells us that is that global VC investment in AI increased from 6 billion in 2016 to over 26 billion in 2019. So let's talk a little bit about AI and its history. It's one of the most popular buzzwords of recent years, and it's an active topic of conversation, debate, controversy, but it's not new. It started quite a while back. The term itself was coined in 1956 by John McCarthy, one of the godfathers of the field. He also realized it was a tricky concept to firmly define, and he made the observation that as soon as it works, no one calls it AI anymore. I first stumbled upon it as an undergraduate student. I was a student at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. My plan was to pursue a graduate degree in neuroscience. I took an introductory course in machine learning, and I immediately fell in love. It was exciting and quite challenging. It was a combination of calculus, linear algebra, probability theory, and statistics, software development, data structures, algorithms, and so on. And a lot of what I've studied in previous courses went into allowing me to understand what the technology was actually all about. So I made a decision to change my route. Instead of trying to understand the human brain, I decided to go to grad school to build brains and to study AI. And thus, I came to Toronto. In 2006, the University of Toronto was already one of the best places in the world for doing a PhD in machine learning. I spent around 6 years as an academic, including, by the way, a year in total in England as an academic visitor to Cambridge University and a research intern at Microsoft Research in Cambridge. Of course, researchers from all over the world have been contributing steadily to the development and advances in the field. Canada, however, does stand out because of two very big breakthroughs in the past decade that we very much rely on today. They were championed, led, and developed in Canada. I got to see AI transform from a niche academic topic that perhaps 1,000 people worldwide really cared about and all knew each other, to an area that draws tens of thousands of practitioners, hundreds of thousands of people doing online courses, and many, many people curious to know more. And we're seeing an explosion worldwide of interest in the field. So what are these breakthroughs? First, deep learning that came out of Toronto and Montreal, as well as reinforcement learning that came out of Edmonton. So let's talk a moment about these buzzwords. AI is a branch of computer science that is concerned with the automation of intelligent behavior. The goal of AI research is to create software that imitates intelligent behavior. The important thing about this definition is it tells us nothing about how to go about building AI systems. If you write a set of rules to describe how to win a game of tic-tac-toe every time, that is an AI. Machine learning is a sub-area of AI, and it's giving you a prescription as to how to go about solving this problem. So it's not by a set of rules or other means, it's specifically by getting access to a lot of data that shows you how it's actually done. So we need to provide a computer many examples. Of course, this is why there is so much focus on the importance of data and who has access to it. And then deep learning is a technique within machine learning that borrows from the idea of the human brain and is a form of an artificial neural network. Today, people use these terms AI, machine learning, deep learning quite interchangeably. Reinforcement learning is a paradigm within machine learning that borrows from the idea of how humans learn, which is by observing the effects of our choices on the environment and getting a reward or punishment for the actions we take. One of my favorite Winston Churchill quotes is that success is the ability to go from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. And this is reinforcement learning in a nutshell. So now that we all understand the terminology, the first technique mentioned, that of deep learning, was first explored in the 60s and 70s under the name of artificial neural network and had some moments of glory in the 80s. After that, it became hugely unpopular for over 2 decades, until around 2012. In some academic circles, it was actually considered a joke to study these algorithms, yet some researchers insisted they were still the way to go. Of the less than handful research groups who consistently drove research in the area of neural networks, 2 of the most important ones were in Canada. There's the group led by Jeff Hinton, who has been studying neural networks since the late 70s and has been a University of Toronto professor since the late 80s. And the group led by Yoshua Bengio, who has been studying them in the late 80s and is a faculty member of Montreal since the early 90s, of course, still working in the area. Reinforcement learning was very much developed and championed by Rich Sutton, a professor at the University of Alberta. So as you probably all realize yourself, over the last decade, and in particular in the last 5 years, we've experienced this incredible growth in AI and its applications. This is absolutely due to the success of deep learning in solving real-world problems. Whether you're aware of it or not, you're using neural networks dozens of times a day. The applicability of AI for real-world problems is what really appealed to me in the field. When I was doing my doctorate, I also did a few internships in more industry-facing applied AI roles, like the algorithms we use for the Kinect gaming system. And I realized I really love this place where we bring AI into the real world. So, post-graduation, I wanted to be part of this, and I decided to stay in Canada, leave academia, and focus on industrial applications of taking AI into production systems. For me, as someone living in Toronto, the last 10 years were an incredible opportunity to be part of a thriving ecosystem and see it really grow and bloom. 9 years ago, admittedly, not much was going on in the AI scene in Toronto. So out of school, I chose to design algorithms for Altera, which is now part of Intel, a company that makes FPGAs. It's just a type of a computer chip. Interestingly, now there is actually a lot of work on implementing neural networks on these FPGAs. From there, I moved back to working on applied AI for Kobo, which is a Canadian Kindle. There are many ways in which AI can be used to improve the consumer and reader experience for e-reading. We can process the content of books to support better search of recommendations. We can make many ways in which the reading experience is easier. So it was a very fertile ground for many usages of the technology that drove measurable improved business results. My next adventure was in getting getting into robotics. So for me, robotics is one of the most exciting areas where we can introduce AI, because when we have to interface with the real world, things get more complicated and difficult. Kindred, where I worked at, is a startup founded by Canadians with offices in Toronto and San Francisco that delivers warehouse automation, pick-and-place solutions for moving around things in warehouses, packaging, and so on. So it uses computer vision AI, and I led their software and machine learning divisions. I was always interested in tangible things you can actually touch and move around, and reflecting on my journey, it looks like I just like bigger and bigger toys. And so now, I work at Uber on self-driving cars. I joined Uber about 3.5 years ago, and the R&D lab in Toronto, I think, is a really great example of a large international corporation setting shop in Toronto because of the unique talent in Canada. The motivation for setting the lab was Raquel Urtasun and her group. So it's a research team out of the University of Toronto that has been focusing on AI, computer vision, and self-driving within an academic setup. Raquel joined ATG as the head of the Toronto lab and is the chief scientist for the organization. My role is that of taking the research prototypes into production, leading a team of research and software engineers. We recruit heavily from U of T and from the University of Waterloo, and we have a very healthy influx of international talent. My team is currently around 16 people, and they come from all over the world: Iran, China, India, France, Israel, Brazil, Russia, and even the US. We have very few Canadians who were born or raised in Canada. The office is about 60 people in total, and we're from all over the world. And this is a very typical example for tech in Canada. And the fact that Canada is such a powerhouse of AI is well reflected in the incredible amount of large companies that have set shop in Canada just in the last few years. So why is it so useful to be doing AI in Canada? So first of all, it's close to academic centers of excellence. There is a very interesting and exciting relationship between industry and academia in Canada. There was a realization that this is an important connection, that there are good reasons to foster AI research and to put resources into it. Thanks to the dedication of the Canadian provincial and federal government, as well as various industrial players, there are big research centers that were formed or considerably grown to foster research and collaboration with industry around AI. Vector in Toronto is one of these academic centers. This is where Jeff Hinton, that we spoke of before, is a co-founder along with several other rock stars and rising stars of machine learning who came together to form the core team in 2017. It's got strong ties to many universities, including the University of Toronto, of course, which is ranked 10th in the world in computer science. Mila in Montreal is headed by Yoshua Bengio. It was formed in 1993. It has the highest concentration of researchers and students of deep learning in the world. And then Amy in Alberta, which was formed and headed by Richard Sutton in 2002. University of Alberta has been ranked as one of the top 3 universities in AI research consistently for the past 25 years. The important thing is that we have all of these well-established institutes who all run a variety of programs and initiatives to drive collaboration with industry, benefiting from a very large pool of researchers. If you look at the AI department sizes in other institutions, the Canadian ones are very large and have many top researchers in the academic field concentrated in one place. It also means that for those academics who decide to leave academia or do it part-time in favor of, say, heading a big research lab, if they do it in Canada, if they come from our ecosystem, they are also AI stars. And they get to be around their colleagues and continue collaborating with academia. So overall, this gives us, it gives them an incredible incentive to stay in Canada and do interesting, impactful work in AI, because they can be close to one of these hotbeds. Another thing that we're seeing happening is international big technology companies opening offices in Canada. And that has been accelerating in the last few years. So, of course, I work at Uber in Toronto. We also have Google AI in Toronto and Montreal. DeepMind has offices in both Alberta and Montreal. Microsoft Research in Montreal. Samsung has an AI lab in Toronto. Facebook has the Facebook Artificial Intelligence Research or FAIR in Montreal. And NVIDIA has an office in Toronto. And this is just a few examples. So looking at across Canada view, the AI ecosystem in Canada evolved considerably over the past 10 years. The private sector has attracted over $3 billion in new investment and created 50,000 jobs at 670 active AI-focused firms that are literally spread across the country. So going from west to east, Vancouver's strength beyond just AI lies in graphics, gaming, and other tech sectors. It's a global leader in computer vision with a world-class computing science university. Alberta researchers do work ranging from NLP to precision medicine, and of course, focus on reinforcement learning. In Saskatchewan, we have a lot of investment in key infrastructure for AI development, much of it in the context of natural resource extraction. In Winnipeg, we have an AI ecosystem that puts a lot of focus on AI for agriculture, advanced manufacturing, and the aerospace sectors. In Ontario, in London, Ontario, we have particular strengths in AI in automotive, defense, and aerospace, as well as food and beverage processing industries. Waterloo has an incredible software engineering schools, and many AI businesses and global companies have presence there, like Google, SAP, Oracle, IBM, and Ford. Ottawa, Canada's capital, is home to IBM Watson's R&D site, Shopify, one of the greatest Canadian success stories in tech, and others. It also has a world-class testing facility for connected and autonomous vehicles. Toronto has the highest number of AI startups in the world. Startups have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and these companies have a combined market cap in the billions. It is home to several accelerators and incubators that are world-renowned. I am an advisor in several of them, and most companies I advise and meet have an AI component. Toronto is home to more than 10 AI research labs and hubs, and we've talked about some of them, and it is the #1 place where tech workers are headed right now. Montreal boasts a strong ecosystem of researchers and practitioners with many startups and global tech, and a lot of commercialization of AI technologies. Quebec City has expertise in sensors and automation for robotics. And finally, Nova Scotia, with more than 7,000 kilometers of coastline, spearheads the development of ocean technology and is a Canadian leader in offering AI-based technology for the good of our oceans. So why do AI in Canada? Whether through investment or setting up offices and operations internationally, in general, for businesses, there are many good reasons to do so in Canada specifically. And these range from the many measures put in place to make it a favorable place for foreign investment, the stable and well-performing economy, the high level of educations, and the fact that it's generally known to be one of the best places in the world to live and work in. So setting up a business in Canada is very easy. In fact, it's ranked #2 in the G20 for doing businesses and 9th out of 82 countries worldwide. It's ranked first for the lowest number of procedures and time required to actually start a business, and third in Global Entrepreneurship Index out of 137 countries. Canada has very favorable tax rates. It's the third lowest in statutory corporate income tax rate in the G7 in 2019 at 26.6%. And in particular for R&D, there are a lot of tax advantages and generous subsidiaries. Canada has easy immigration laws for skilled workers. For someone with the background in engineering or AI, it is exceptionally easy to move to Canada. In fact, there is now regulation in place to allow for a 2 weeks turnaround period for work permits for such workers. So this leads to an influx of highly skilled people in the area and an exceptionally diverse workforce. It allows companies the ability to easily recruit and attract international talent without a lot of limitations or wait times. It ranks #1 as the place where entrepreneurs would like to potentially immigrate. And we all know diversity is critical for success. Countless studies have shown us how companies with diverse leadership and boards considerably outperform heterogeneously led companies. And I want to highlight an area of excellency that is the female leadership in AI in Canada. So at Uber, our R&D office in Toronto has an all-female leadership. We have Professor Raquel Urtasun, as I mentioned, a U of T professor, one of the co-founders of the Vector Institute and the head of the lab. Myself leading the engineering, our technical project manager, our program manager are all women. None of us was born in Canada. Of the many AI labs across the country that I mentioned before, we have a lot that are led by women, which I think is incredible. So we have Duina Prikup at DeepMind in Montreal, Sanya Fiedler heading the NVIDIA lab in Toronto, Julie Pinault heading the Facebook research lab in Montreal, the head of the data science and engineering at Shopify, Solmaz, is based out of Ottawa. In Vector, about 20% of the faculty is women, which might not sound like a lot, but for a tech area, it is completely unheard of. So let's look at why doing businesses in Canada is useful, specifically from the lens of AI. So we've talked about how it's one of the largest concentration of world experts in the area of AI. And what we see is the top-down support. So from provincial and federal resources, there are a variety of programs set in place to support businesses and collaboration opportunities. There is government R&D spending, there is R&D tax incentives, there are institutes at the federal and provincial level to promote innovation, excellency, with a lot of focus on AI. To give you an example, CFAR, the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, provides funding and various forms of support to research, and particularly in the area of AI. And then there is bottom-up support, where research centers and universities across Canada provide access to excellent graduating students and interns trained in AI. The AI centers that we've talked of offer many programs for supporting businesses and companies who deal with AI. Mila, Amy, Vector all provide a variety of programs for interacting with industry, training executives in AI, working on specific research projects collaboratively, helping organizations become AI ready with strategic advice, and so on, and all with the top experts in the world. I want to discuss another reason why doing AI in Canada is a great choice, which is the software engineering side of things. I lead teams of research and software engineers in taking AI into production systems and making research prototypes a reality. Anyone who deals with applied AI from the trenches will tell you that you don't only need the specific expertise, you really truly need an army of software developers and programmers to make it into a full production system. So in addition to the great expertise we have in AI in Canada, we also have an array of exceptionally strong schools who are internationally renowned. I will call out one, which is the University of Waterloo in Ontario, that has an outstanding co-op program where students alternate between coursework and internships. By the time they graduate, they have a year or more of experience working in tech across different companies in different sectors. In the past, many of these graduating students left to places like Silicon Valley, but things have changed rather rapidly. Some of the reasons include this ever-growing Canadian tech ecosystem, which, as it turns out, is the fastest growing tech center in the world, with, as I mentioned, the largest number of AI startups in the world being in Toronto, and one of the most active spaces for VC investment in the world. Visa regulation that made it considerably harder to move or to stay in the US in other places, and also the stable political and economic climate that makes it a good destination for settling down and building a life here in Canada. Because of exchange rates and cost of living, cities like Toronto rank really high on the quality of workers and low on labor costs, relatively speaking. And these all have led to a noticeable brain gain and an influx of great talent pool for software engineering required to support all of this applied AI. We're ranked first in G7 for all of overall living conditions and quality of life, and Canada places in top 10 for democracy, peace, and global reputation regularly. So in summary, AI is here, it's making its effect globally, and we Canadians are proud to be a fundamental part of it. Canada is a diverse and vibrant place to do business in, and especially in AI, and I know that this trend will only increase in the years to come. Thank you.